This video is about how to set up your company or companies in Studio Suite. Let's jump right in. When you first log into Studio Suite, you'll see there's some sample data there. Sample project, sample events, sample follow-ups, and sample tasks, as well as a sample company, actually two sample companies. So to set up your company, in the upper right-hand corner, click the gear tool and click on Setup. There you'll see the two sample companies, and we'll just hit the trash can by both of these to get rid of them. And on a side note, it is possible to delete all of the sample data in Studio Suite, but that's another video. So to create a new company, I'll hit the plus new company division button and just type it in. Best studio ever, of course. And you always want your primary company to be company number 1. That's the default company that's going to get used in certain situations. If you have multiple companies, just create another. And it's company number 2. Now we have the option to go back and put the address and the phones. You can also put in your website and your time zone. The time zone is important if you'll be sending calendar invites to people in other time zones, so that way Studio Suite can do the translation for you across the different time zones. And your currency symbol. If you are in a non-US country, you may need to change the address format to Euro, which changes the way that the full address is calculated. And you may also want to adjust the paper size to A4 or US letter. And, of course, the language over on the right side. To insert your logo, click on the Logos tab and right-click on the logo icon and select Insert into Container. Choose File. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to choose my Best Studio Ever logo, and I'm going to upload that. Once that's done, I want to use the on-screen logo as well for the print version. So I'm going to hit the arrow button that copies that over there. We also have a watermark version available. Most people don't use it, but it's there if you want it. And also the letterhead graphic. Maybe you've got a full graphic that you use for letterhead. You can use either a different graphic or the same one. I'm going to use the same one in this case. Just to illustrate what that means, over here on your letterhead default settings, you can use auto, in which case it will calculate a letterhead for you, Best Studio Ever, with your address and phone number on the right. Or if you select custom, it'll use the entire graphic that you put in there as the top of the letter for your letterhead. On the Taxes tab, this is where you can create taxes that are applicable to you. Of course, you can delete our sample data in there, or in this case, we'll just hit the plus button, and we'll say, my local tax. And let's pretend you're very lucky, and you just pay 0.05% tax there. Some of our customers don't do taxes at all, and that's fine. Setting the default tax, this determines what new client records or new contact records will inherit as their default tax. So if you want to get rid of the ones that are there and make it be my local tax, that means that each new contact record will get my local tax as their tax. And further on taxes, in different cities, counties, states, and countries, different things are taxed differently. So for example, maybe in your area, services are taxed, but people are not. So this is how you can manage that. To clear all of the taxes, you just hit the C button, and if you want to select all of them, go ahead and hit the All button. In the bottom center, this is where you talk about currencies. A lot of our customers are in the US, and so we have it set so with the US dollar to 1, and every other currency is the exchange rate compared to that. Of course, these are static, and you might need to change them on your own. If you are in a different currency, you're going to want to set your currency, let's say Euro, if you're in the European Union, to 1, and then you want to put in the currency exchange rate to all of the other currencies that are relative to that. Once you've determined all that, at the default, select what your local currency is. Next over is titles. Every project has a default client slot. Different customers call the client something different. Sometimes it's the account, agency, client, department, division, network, or student. Essentially, it's the entity responsible for paying the bill. There are other slots or titles on every project, and you can choose them here. So we've got it by default set to producer, editor, and assistant. Perhaps on every one of your projects you have a production coordinator, so that's going to be in the first slot. You can also, of course, edit this list, so if you want to add something different, you can. The Module Preferences tab shows preferences applicable to certain modules throughout Studio Suite. They're more applicable to those modules than they are the company setup, so we're going to cover those in videos relative to those modules. But of course, please feel free to look around, and you'll probably see that many of them are fairly self-explanatory. An important one, though, is value lists. There's two primary ones, categories and statuses. Categories are what determine how reports are summarized by. Many people use the default categories out of the box, but if you want to create a new one, hit the plus button. And let's put in another one here called My Category. And we could also determine a sort order. So I'll put in the sort number 5, and we're going to see it appear here between 4 and 6. There's my category. There's other preferences that we can assign to certain categories, such as a QuickBooks or accounting account code and type, and whether or not we want to share items in that calendar in external calendars, and also how the invoice description would be calculated for items in that category. For example, room events or people events, sometimes the start and end time is very important, whereas in equipment events, for example, they may not be. So you can determine how they're going to be described on an invoice. The Statuses tab is where you define the different booking statuses for events within a project. So when you book a room or a person, for example, they could be confirmed or on hold or bumpable or paid. To adjust that, click the Edit button. And here is a list of all of the statuses that you might have. To add a new one, I'll put in My Status and I'll click Save. Once we've created a status, we can choose a color just by clicking here and then pick from any of the colors that we've defined there. Now, each status can have several different rules. Some statuses, like for example canceled, we may not need to do conflict checks for them, so we have a skip conflict check. And similarly, we don't need a report on all the revenue from canceled events because they didn't generate any revenue. And certain statuses we may want to hide from the calendar, maybe canceled or on hold. And certain statuses we may not want to share with external calendars, such as Google, iCal, Exchange, Outlook, etc. Some statuses are special. Different people use different words or even different languages to mean different kinds of things. So over here, put in your word for hold, your word for to be checked out, your word for checked out, your word for checked back in, and your word for overdue and out of service. Record numbers. You may want to have your projects, for example, start at a number corresponding with the year. So let's say 18 for 2018, 0001. So the next project created will be 180001. And then when the following year, 2019, comes around, you'll change this to 190001. Just an option. So every module can have its own separate starting number. The Miscellaneous tab, we're going to mostly skip over. These are all kind of tweezy bits. I'll just mention that the add-on plugins, this is where you might go if you were going to be setting up the integration to QuickBooks. However, we would typically be helping you with that. And I'll also mention the audit log. This is showing all of the changes that were made to this company just during this video. The date, the time, who made the video, what field was changed from what to what. That's the audit log. And then finally, import and delete. I mentioned earlier there's sample data. This button here will delete all of the sample data within Studio Suite for you. If you're coming from an earlier version of Studio Suite, clicking this button will walk you through the process of importing that data. Or if you are importing data from the Studio Suite data migration template, it's an Excel file that's set up to be able to import into Studio Suite 12, and you just simply click this button and it would walk you through the import of that data. Well, that's about it for setting up a company in Studio Suite. See, it's pretty easy. Make sure to send us an email if you have any questions at info@studiosuite.com, or just give us a call at 818-955-9550 or 800-450-5740. Thanks for watching.